myself, Barbara McAdam, Urban Hort Program Specialist with UF IFAS Extension, Miami-Dade County Office, and we are partnered with Parks, Recreation, Open Spaces, Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department, Department of Environmental Resource Management, and did I forget anyone, Laura? So this is my email right here. Please address any questions that you have directly to my email rather than the Gmail that you got the email from reminding you about this event. And if you dial this number right here during working hours, that will ring through to my cell phone while we are still transitioning from working in the bubble and going back to working inside the extension office. We'll be able to see people by appointment only starting soon, if the trend still continues. So you guys will see my purple rain barrel there set up in my yard. And you're going to see a little bit, you can't really make it out too well. This is the purple salvia, which will be featured in the presentation. So, Laura, can you hear me and just let me know how many people we have signed on?
Yes, audio is good, and so far we have 27.
Okay, I think maybe we'll go ahead and get started, but I'll go a little slow. I do want to have time to answer your questions afterwards, and again, if there are questions you don't get answered, you can send me an email, and I will be sharing a PDF of this PowerPoint, which has all of the links and the resources that I'm going to talk about after we talk about plants. So the recommended pre-watch, if you didn't get a chance to watch it before, watch it sometime in the near future. This will help you with a greater understanding. Jarrett Daniels creating pollinator habitats in the built environment, and how to use the Institute for Regional Conservation's database. This is a short, not as long as Jarrett's presentation. They're both very, very good, very excellent tools for helping you create pollinator gardens. So this is another excellent tool. And let me just go back. You'll see along the bottom of most of the slides, Florida-friendly landscaping is pollinator-friendly landscaping. And Florida-friendly landscaping is an integrated approach to maintaining, creating a diverse, attractive, Florida-friendly landscape that can be full of life. It is actually a state statute, and it was designed to conserve water, protect the environment. And it is adaptable throughout the state to our local environmental conditions. You'll want to dial in the plants. So Florida-friendly landscaping has 9 principles: right plant, right place, water efficiently, fertilize appropriately, because that can get into our water resources. If you get your plants in the right place and you have the right plants, then you won't need as much fertilizer, you won't have as many problems dealing with yard pests. You'll attract wildlife, and you'll protect the areas around you from stormwater runoff. You'll recycle or compost on site, and this will help protect the waterfront. This is the frontline defense for some of the issues that we are seeing in Biscayne Bay right now. So right plant, right place. I'm not going to go through everything on this, but let's just say this is the cornerstone of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. And if you follow the links here or come to our website, this segment is entirely just about right plant, right place, and all of the things you need to consider when getting the plants in the right place. And of course, the big question here is what plants really grow here. And we're going to look at some of the resources that will help guide you to plant selection. That's always a question, because nobody has all of these plants memorized, and they're not the plants that you're going to see in the big box stores. So truly, selecting plants for pollinators is the next level of principle number 1, right plant, right place. We need to really dial in the plants if we're going to provide for pollinators. So the big question, what do pollinators do for us? Why are we talking about or caring about providing for them in our landscapes? Well, the big answer, first of all, is they feed us. And that would be all of the healthy fruits and vegetables that you see here on display at the Fruit and Spice Park. And there's just over 200 mangoes on display at the Fruit and Spice Park also. So anything you could think of that's healthy, a vegetable, it started out as a flower and it needed to be pollinated. And even your leafy green plants, they will eventually produce flowers and go to seed. They started from seeds that needed pollinators. Also, even if we're just thinking about honeybees, I think that's the first thing that comes to mind when we say pollinators is it's bees, it's honeybees. These are European honeybees, and pollen, which gets transferred from plant to plant, also is a benefit to honeybees. You can see there they're actually collecting pollen on their hind legs and taking this back to the hive to make bee bread. Now, if you watch Jarrett Daniels' presentation, he featured this article from New York Times. It was titled "The Insect Apocalypse," and we've been hearing about the decline of insects for a good 5 or 6 years now. And I've got a little feedback from some people who had watched Jarrett Daniels' presentation saying, well, what about this? And I was presented with some research that said, oh, good news, the insects are not all in decline. Well, I shared it with some of the research scientists at UF, and we unpacked it and looked at the data, and it was very sparse, not covering all of the United States, and some of the information was dated. Much more data needs to be gathered. So this brings me to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and this website tracks declines in all species of life on our planet. This is the red list. Some of you may have heard of it. I think many of us environmental or conservation educators and researchers have. This has been on our radar for 5, 6, 7 years now, that this list is growing. This is one of the areas where you can explore this. The number of species that are endangered, critically endangered, is growing and increasing exponentially. And of course, when you get to here, that's the end. There are some species that are in the least concerned or near threatened, but they may be regionally secure, but not secure worldwide in all of the habitats where they appear. This year's Congress was supposed to be held in Marseille, France, and unfortunately they weren't going to send me anyway, but it had to be canceled. Hopefully Jarrett Daniels could go to this. And it looks like this event may take place virtually. And in that case, almost everybody will be able to attend. And what's been happening with these virtual presentations and seminars and symposiums is a lot of them are free. So that just opens the opportunity for a lot of people to be part of this. When you get a chance, I'm not going to play any videos tonight for time's sake, but this is very powerful. It's a short, about 3 minutes that IUCN put together, talking about the generations. We're the ones that need to make the difference. So watch it when you have a chance. So how can we help these pollinators? Well, Beatrice Moissat, and this is a beautiful blog, talks about we are all part of the web of life, and animals need plants and plants need animals. We're all interconnected, and we all interact in a complex web, and each is interdependent on each other. Sorry, I can't seem to speak tonight. Hope that gets better. In Jarrett Daniels' presentation, we'll dial it in to how do we create and where do we create these landscapes for pollinators. And all landscapes are important, from farm, easements, this would be under power lines, roadsides, suburban, urban, and he didn't specifically call out parks, but yes, parks and school grounds are part of that, and our natural areas. It's important that we add the plants for pollinators and include them in our landscapes and environments so that we can help provide for them. And this is a screenshot from his presentation. Great presentation. I could watch it again, but you'll see a lot of plants that are probably unfamiliar to us down here in South Florida, like bee balm. That's not something that we could really grow here. You might, like anything in South Florida, you can get it to grow for a while, but will it thrive without a lot of inputs of water? Probably not. And Coreopsis, which is our state wildflower, a species of this grows in every county throughout the state of Florida. This is a native milkweed. Can't really grow that one very well here. And Laura, you'll recognize the blend extension office landscape. So pollinators need flowering plants, and I tricked you with this slide because these are a lot of the plants that you'll see in the stores, maybe at your, we don't have any corner nursery. You either come down south to shop wholesale or the occasional plant nursery that allows the public in on a special day each month, or you go to the big box stores to buy plants. And this is what you'll see in those stores. Impatiens, you're going to start to see a lot of these as people start to want to spruce up their landscapes before the holiday. And these plants just do not do well here. They actually get a root rot disease if they make it through the winter and they make it into the rainy season. They don't like our soggy soils. Ixoras, they don't like our alkaline soil, and many of these just don't have nectar. Hibiscus struggle to grow here. That's an arid region. They do great in California. They came from China, if that gives you an idea. So they're not suited here. And a lot of these plants that have been hybridized, they've lost their nectaries and they just aren't, they have no scent. They may be big and bold and beautiful and have a lot of color, and a pollinator, a butterfly, or a hummingbird may hover around them, but they'll quickly realize that there's no nectar there for them to have, which is what they're all looking for. And it's that process of them gathering the nectar where the pollen rubs off and then gets transferred to the next plant that they visit for nectar. So one thing you should look at is annuals versus perennials. And a lot of what you see in the stores, and I'm sorry if it feels like I'm kind of hammering on them, but if we start to ask for more Florida-friendly perennials and the things that we know really grow here, then maybe they might put more of them on the shelves. They are shopping from a beautiful list, a website, and they're picking for the most part, things that they think are really eye-catching. And you can get really overwhelmed when you go on there. And just about none of these are going to survive for any amount of time. Perhaps the begonias, if you get them in the right spot, and the marigolds will do well, but they're going to, you're going to need to deadhead them and maybe replant the seed heads that form if you don't deadhead them. So plant knowledge is key. So perennials, this is what we want to aim for. It's a plant that lives more than 2 years because there can be biannuals that take 2 years. By the way, most of those annuals that you see on the shelves, when they're at peak flower and bloom and they're enticing you, they're going to finish flowering. They may have a few more flowers that appear, and then they're going to kaput, die, because that's what annuals do. They have a short lifespan. It's one season, and that could be one rainy season or one dry season or one cool season, etc. And sometimes they may live for 2 years, but what we want to really go for is the perennials. Spend your money wisely. So this is a lot of verbiage here. I'm going to share the PDF and you guys can read this later, but if you watch Jarrett Daniels' presentation, he talks about having a wide assortment rather than just a few kinds, but not maybe limit it to about 8 species of flowers. And butterflies are attracted to bright colors, and you want to include your larval host plants. Otherwise, your butterflies are just going to be passing through and they won't actually stay, lay their eggs, and raise a family in your yard. Most of those larval host plants are going to be native. That's why we sent you the link for Institute for Regional Conservation's website. Now, you want to create vertical, high, as well as low, and areas that create shelter. Right now, the zebra longwings are all fluttering around the very shady part of my side yard to the north of where I'm sitting, and they're about to roost for the evening. They all sleep at night as a colony. And you want to make sure that you have a variety of plants that bloom throughout the year. Very few plants will bloom all year long. Plants have a peak season of flower. Mixed flower shapes and sizes. Sometimes a butterfly might have a short proboscis, like a tala, and may not be able to reach the nectar in, say, a fire bush. And some butterflies like a landing platform, others will hover. And you notice I'm talking more about butterflies, because I think if we get it right for butterflies, you're going to get it right for most of the pollinators you're going to find visiting your yard. So, plant in masses in groupings, not ... There's currently a gardening program that I've watched a couple of times that has just been a mess. I won't mention the name, but they plant everything all mishmashed together without any thought of how big anything's going to get. Guarantee you in about 6 months, everything's going to be a maze of just tangled. So if you plant them in a group, also the pollinator is going to be more likely to zero into that, smell it, notice that it has the nectar, or it's going to give off the pheromones or the chemical compounds that attract them. Then they know that it's its larval host. So, Guide to Planting Wildflower Enhancements in Florida. We have excellent publications on our EDIS website. Remember, again, you're going to have all of these. Just a few more slides and we're going to be into plants. And Xerces Society. And a lot of people talk about European honeybees. You should know that there are many, many native bees and other pollinators. In our presentations through the summer, when we celebrated Pollinator Week, I put up a slide on the research that's being done at Trek, studying all of the pollinators that visit mangoes. And if you ever catch the mango flowers with the sun in the background as it's starting to set, you'll just see a haze of pollinators all over those mango flowers. And trust me, mango flowers smell as good as mangoes taste. So all of the pollinators in the whole area are doing their job to pollinate the mango flowers. That's why we have such good crops down here, and we don't necessarily have to rely on European honeybee hives. The Xerces Society does have a great publication, and I always remember I listened to a presentation a couple of years ago, a recording, where the director of the Xerces Society stated that we already have enough information, we already have the tools, the information, the knowledge to start saving pollinators. That was 3 or 4 years ago. We have it. Let's get to work out in the garden tomorrow. So we'll start with butterflies. And this is one of our 4 endangered butterflies here in South Florida. We're not going to watch the video, but if you want to take a just totally refreshing 6-minute trip to the Keys with researcher Sarah Steele Cabrera, this video is superb. You will feel like you've been to the Keys and back, and you'll look at all of the hard work that is going into rearing these caterpillars in Gainesville, transporting them down to 2 small areas in the Keys and releasing them so that we can try to increase their population. Keep in mind that any hurricane that comes along could wipe everything out. You'll see in this video how the Miami blue, named after Miami, used to be all along the coastline of southern Florida, east and west and down through all of the Keys, and is now found only in 2 small areas. And you'll get a nice refreshing view of the Keys. So let's take a little introduction to our South Florida butterflies. 4 are endangered. The Miami blue we looked at, Bartram's hairstreak, Florida leafwing, and Shelse's swallowtail. 2 of these butterflies are pine rockland butterflies, and they happen to use the same larval host. We'll talk more about that later. But it might be surprising to know that 39 butterflies are in various stages of decline. They are considered imperiled, and we have an imperiled butterfly working group. We meet annually. That should be sometime in January. I don't know how we're going to do it this year. Hopefully it will happen. So this is a poster split in 2 of all 39 butterflies. And you'll notice the word extinct here. This little guy right here, Zesto skipper, may have been just an occasional visitor and not a true resident, but it's no longer found here. So it is considered by some to be extinct, by others to not really be one of our true butterflies here. But we're in from endangered, threatened, rarely seen. We're in this stage of decline with 39 butterflies. If we're in those stages of decline for these big, bold, beautiful flying insects that we can pretty much easily see, then where are we with the other smaller pollinators that go unnoticed? So we're going to start with plants, and I'm going to start with trees first. And I want to thank Million Trees Miami and Adopt a Tree. If you guys are looking for trees, some of these, well, Adopt a Tree wasn't able to happen this year, and all of our volunteer events were put on hold with Million Trees Miami. But both of these county groups, Million Trees Miami is part of the Parks Open Spaces, Parks Recreation Open Spaces family. They have added trees that are also larval host for pollinators, and Adopt a Tree has added other plants as well as trees that may grow into somewhere between a large shrub or a small tree. So check out those websites and look for events to come. You can get 2 free trees from Adopt a Tree each year, and hopefully we'll be back on with that program in 2021. So the first tree, we'll go to the coast, because this is coastal hammocks and thickets, and this is Biscayne prickly ash. And I focused on some larval host plants for swallowtail butterflies, and I know Teddy LaHoulier from University of Miami, the Green U, is probably not listening tonight, but I told him I was going to mention his name because we've talked about his sightings of swallowtails just drifting through his yard, but not really hanging out. And you might want to add some of the larval host plants. This is a larval host plant for the giant swallowtail. And I've put all of the links to Institute for Regional Conservation's website. So when you get this, you can look up the total complete information on everything you need to know about this plant. I've put some of that information up, but not all of it. So drought tolerant, truly a Florida-friendly landscape plant, and it's a small to medium or a large shrub. It does have some little prickly things. You might want to plant this if you are in more of a coastal location and avoid having this in any place that's going to be inundated with a lot of rainwater. It's very drought tolerant once established, and it needs full sun. Here's another larval host for giant swallowtail, Hercules club. And it's also a small tree, although sometimes it will grow as high as 65 feet. And it also has some little prickles on it. So just a word about giant swallowtails. They've also been referred to as, orange dogs by people growing citrus, because they will use plants in the citrus family as a larval host, and sometimes there can be so many of them in the old days in the orange groves that they might start eating too many leaves. Now we don't have citrus in the landscape because of citrus greening. These butterflies need some plants that will thrive in our landscapes so that they can lay their eggs and reproduce. I have 4 to 5 giant swallowtails drifting through my yard at any one time. Sweet Bay magnolia. Oh, this is one of my most favorite plants and very, very difficult to find. And it's been a long time since I have seen the eastern tiger swallowtail butterfly. This plant pretty much needs a wet location, and we're getting drier and hotter, longer periods. The last time I saw an eastern tiger swallowtail, it was the lighter form, and it was at Elaine Gordon Enchanted Forest, where they did have some Sweet Bay magnolia growing. So I have my eye on where this is growing. Roger Hammer has one in his yard. We have one at the extension. I'm watching for seeds to try to start this up. This would be perfect around the edge of the pond at the Fruit and Spice Park, and we could have the fragrant flowers. They're not as big as Magnolia grandiflora, but they are exquisitely sweet, and maybe we could have this butterfly. I don't know how it would find it, since pretty much the only place this butterfly is now found is in Everglades National Park. False tamarin. This tree will grow large, and it's a larval host for the dainty little Cassius blue, large orange sulfur, and mimosa yellow butterflies. These are the butterflies. This tree is covered with these small white little powder puff flowers, and to get near this, it just is so fragrant when it's in flower. There's the little delicate little blue, and here are our sulfur butterflies. And I got a Mexican alivara, or alivaro, I can't pronounce this. I got a Mexican great butterfly tree from Connect to Protect, and it's the larval host for the little Eurema dina, or Dina yellow butterfly, which is one of our threatened butterflies. And this is the only one of the plants that I got from Connect to Protect when I joined that I haven't yet planted. So I think this is the weekend when I'm going to plant it. Of course, now I'm going to have to watch it and make sure when it doesn't rain that I do water it through the establishment period. Apple blossom cassia. This is a photo. Sorry for that little number there. This tree sits at the front entrance to the Fruit and Spice Park, and it is just ablaze with flowers in the springtime, and it's also larval host for the cloudless and the orange barred sulfurs. It's not a big tree, it's about 35 by 35, and it grows pretty fast. So if you have the space in your landscape for trees, start with them, plant them, but do leave some open sunny spaces as well. So to the coast. Mangroves, black mangrove, red mangrove are very, very important. Larval host for the mangrove buckeye, and they're nectar for many, many butterflies. And they also attract bees. When we're attracting butterflies for pollen, for nectar, we're also attracting everything else out there again. So this is the mangrove buckeye. There are 3 buckeyes. Sometimes just for fun, you might just line up the photos of the 3 and look at the differences between them. A lot of people like Linda Evans with Miami Blue. She can tell which butterfly is which when they're on the fly. And there's the Stratea sulfurs. And this is a photo of them. I think this is from Costa Rica, where they're actually sipping the moisture from the soil. Red mangroves. So again, the mangrove skipper, but also the Io moth. And Io moth is one where the caterpillars will sting right from the get-go as soon as they emerge. And here's a photo of the mangrove skipper. You can see, if you look closely, you may see how it's been eating around the edges of the leaves. This is also a great place for wildlife to congregate, and I just had to include the frigate bird because this is a bird that all sailors out there on the water would look for and go, oh, I think we're close to land. I see a frigate just kind of soaring way up high in the sky. You can see these from far away when you're out on the water. Lignum vitae. This is a beautiful, beautiful, usually grown, you'll usually see this as a shrub here, and because we don't have a lot of older growth trees, it's slow to very slow. So plant one now. At my age, it would be my great-great-grandchildren who might see a tree. This once existed on Lignum vitae Key, but it was harvested for its beautiful wood and also to make ship's mast out of. It's a larval host for the lyside sulfur as well. And this is a photo of a fairly good sized Lignum vitae. I don't know if you can imagine just this whole tree when it's blooming would be full of these gorgeous blue flowers and just have all kinds of insects hovering around it. So I want to showcase perhaps the grandfather of all trees, the live oak. And this tree is truly a tree of life. There's a lot of research out there talking about how adding trees to the environment increases the diversity of life, wildlife around it. Well, this is a perfect example. It's a larval host for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 butterflies. Of course, squirrels love the acorns. It's a place for great horned owls and other birds to nest. And somewhere in my readings or in past presentations that I viewed, Roger Hammer does talk about the fact that hummingbirds gather nectar from not nectar, I knew I was going to mess that up. They gather pollen and consume the pollen from oak trees. And it's one of their favorite resting spots when they fly their route. They'll pick a spot, a high perch, and rest, and then sort of survey the domain, and then they'll fly the same route. And if you are aware of that about hummingbirds, we should have them any day, if not already, here in our landscapes. They migrate through and will stay if you have enough nectar sources. But if you know that about them, then you can set up a place and sit quietly, and you can maybe set your camera up and get some good photos. The more you're quietly around them in your garden, the more they'll get used to you and they won't be startled. So walk slowly, be quiet, don't make sudden moves, maybe whisper to them a little bit. They make a little squeaky sound, and I usually hear them before I see them. So these are the butterflies. that use the live oak as larval host. And you'll get this. You can see Florida Museum, Department of Entomology. This is the Featured Creatures website, and butterfliesandmoths.org used 3 of those websites to lead you to more information about the butterflies. Now, just a quick word, when you look up these publications, it's going to usually give you a photo of the caterpillar, it's going to name the larval host, and it's going to tell you more about the flight seasons, because not all butterflies are plentiful year-round, even here in South Florida. This is a huge live oak. This is Clyde Butcher's photo of Angel Oak in South Carolina. This tree is around 500 years old. So think about that. This is a tree that can live a very, very long time and can grow to an enormous size. And once these giant trees were plentiful on our planet. This is a champion oak tree from American Forest. And you can go to this website and see more champion trees and truly understand how big these trees can be. A lot of them have been harvested. And when we have these that are getting large like this, they certainly need to be protected. But I want you to notice something about the area surrounding the tree. Here, here, and now this may not be live oak. As a matter of fact, I don't think it is, but live oak or oaks are often slated or specified as street trees. And I actually saw an architect's drawing at the last Leaf Summit. She was from the upper Northeast, where she had on the drawing up on the slide, you could see it was written in live oak for an area along in Coral Gables, Miracle Mile. Well, knowing how large the tree is going to be, you need to take that into account when you select the location. These trees are not planted in a proper location. As large as the canopy is going to become, at least that much space should be allowed for the root zone, the roots to grow unobstructed. And on our website, we have information, and on Adopt a Tree, they have instructions on how to plant trees, how to leave enough space so that their roots will remain unobstructed, they won't become compacted, they won't disrupt the sidewalk, or the tree won't be planted too close to your house and be dropping branches and leaves or fall on your house in case of the next hurricane that comes through. This is another look at live oaks, just given plenty of space. You can see resurrection fern here, another symbiotic relationship, another diversity plus for this tree. And I couldn't resist this look, going down this long road through a tunnel of overhanging branches. That just looks like a little slice of heaven to me. So from Regional Conservation's website, you can pull up when you go to natives for your neighborhood and you select plant, you can just put in oak, O-A-K, and it'll pull up all of the oak trees in the, I think it's 10 or 11 counties that they have plant information for. All of these, except for turkey oak, are suitable for Miami-Dade County. And many of these are small, very small, don't grow very big at all. And they'll be much smaller than the Virginia live oak, and perhaps they will fit better into landscapes when plants are getting specified. And you're thinking about growing one at your house. If you have enough space, highly recommended. Beautiful to watch the sunset through these branches. So another big one, but important. So this is one of our native ficus, and it does get to be pretty tall. Boy, 30 to 40 feet, but 71 feet as it gets older, and it's moderate to fast in growth. But it's a larval host for the ruddy daggerwing and a little wasp, and the fig sphinx moth. And cedar waxwings and many other birds come and eat those fruits. They think they're just yummy. I don't know if they're edible. Please double check before you try to eat any fruits. So here's the ruddy daggerwing, just a gorgeous butterfly. And this is a photo from David Fine. You'll see a little more about, more information from David Fine and Keyes moth. But if you set in on the Moth Week presentations, we did a little segment on chasing ghost, and it was all about the ghost orchid in Fakahatchee Strand, and this giant clump of ghost orchid that grows on one of the last remaining cypress trees growing in that swamp area. And maybe I might give it away a little bit, but this turned out to be the pollinator of the ghost orchid. So what do you think, how important is it to have the larval host for this moth that is the pollinator of the ghost orchid? Pretty important. Although I don't know about the formation of seed pods for ghost orchids or any other information, except that they are very rare and they seem to have liked these more diverse sites and growing high up into the tall trees. So there's a lot of information to process there, but more available for researchers to study and see what we can do to make sure that this orchid remains. And from what I understand, it's very, very fragrant. So you can also try to keep this large tree a little bit bonsai, but I don't recommend that you plant a tree that's going to grow too large for your landscape or the area where you place it. I don't recommend that you resort to constant pruning to keep it in shape. That will just cause the demise of the tree. Eventually it will open it up to diseases. And here's some cedar waxwings. I got lucky enough to catch that day at AD Barnes. I was actually speaking with Audubon director at the time, Laura Reynolds, and I heard this chitter chattering and I went, wait a minute, I have to go check this out. And I walked around the corner and this tree, I don't know what it is. I don't think it's native. It was full of cedar waxwings and they were on their way back north. They were traveling up or in their migratory patterns, and that's something else. We have many, many migratory birds. I mentioned hummingbirds, but all the beautiful little warblers are arriving every day. There's plenty of them flitting around in my yard right now. They love catching insects that live around and amongst the oak trees and other shrubs and plants that I have in the landscape. So Jamaican dogwood or fish poison tree, and this one gets to about 41 feet. It's taller, it's not as broad, and it does well in our soils. The dainty, delicate, ethereal looking Cassius blue, hammock skipper, and the Fluvis hair streak butterflies. And when it flowers, it will carpet the ground in those pink blossoms. So here's those gorgeous butterflies. And again, this is the only larval host, or sometimes the only larval host, or the preferred larval host for these butterflies. So we have to consider trees. Now we're into shrubs, and this is a must-have for everyone's yard. It doesn't get too large. Firebush. This is a photo of a beautiful hedge and leading up to the corner where our extension office is. Now this photo might be a little misleading because this was taken at Southdade Government Center, and you can see this this firebush is covered with Atala butterfly. They had all emerged from their cocoons and they were just resting and letting their wings harden. But the Atala can't actually collect the nectar from firebush because the nectar is in there too deep. And also it's been stated that bees can't get to the nectar because of the depth of the flower. Well, I've seen bees do the shake and certainly get some pollen and maybe kind of force their way in there. But this is a favorite of hummingbirds and many other butterflies. So when you see a lot of verbiage here, that means just follow the link and go check it out. But in addition to be just a major nectar magnet for hummingbirds and a lot of other butterflies, it's a larval host for the Pluto sphinx moth, and that is just a beautiful velvety green moth. One day I came home and both of my firebush were just sticks, no leaves, and I saw this giant caterpillar on there, and aha, it's a sphinx moth. And went to Adrian Hunsberger and said, okay, which one is this? Well, now you can find this information on Institute for Regional Conservation's website, and I do see these moths in my yard in the evening at dusk. And it's also full of fruit. So we've actually had mockingbirds just get very territorial over the shrub in our landscape, and we discovered a nest and little baby mockingbirds. The mother had just set up her nest right in the firebush, and she was eating the berries, but she was bringing back insects for the baby birds to eat. We need the pollinators, we need the caterpillars, because what do you think birds feed their babies? It's about 80% protein. They're going to feed them those caterpillars and insects. As they grow to adults, they may be eating more things than just insects. They may feed on berries, but as babies, they get a high protein diet. But not this plant. Do not mistake firebush. This is firecracker. This also is a great nectar plant for hummingbirds. However, this plant will seed itself all over the place here in South Florida, which brings me to another point, that we need to be looking at what's invasive, and I will share those links with you. Miami-Dade Department of Environmental Resource Management has what not to plant on their website, and we can also link you up with Florida Exotic Pest Plant Council's list of plants. This is a big one. This will grow into a huge shrub, Veronia bulata. It was known as Cordia globosa, and you can see this used to be in our landscape at the extension office, and you could start to count all the little butterflies that are on here. It is a pollinator magnet, and I remember Dr. Suzanne Copter at FIU speaking about this plant at a Native Plant Society chapter meeting years and years ago. So in this tiny little flower, which is smaller than your little fingernail, is some very powerful nectar because it just draws everything into it. Now, it can become a little weedy because it's actually a grows more in the keys, and as it's transition and it's being grown on mainland, it has more soil and it can get larger. It can kind of start clambering and getting into other trees and shrubs. So this is a plant that you might have to prune, but I think it's worth it to have one. But don't plant it near a natural area where it's not found it's not vouchered to be found present in that plant. For instance, if we planted this in A.D. Barnes, this could seed itself and just take over the entire natural area there. So we would limit this to, say, using at Crandon Park or a coastal area where it doesn't have as deep a soil base so it can get out of control. But if you plant this, if you have the place for it and you can keep an eye on it, your pollinator count on all species, bees, butterflies, it will just jump off the charts. We're going to start some of the Justiceas. And if Laura's still listening, this was the the shrimp plant that was planted at the extension office from cuttings from my yard when I moved from Miami Springs. And you can see that it's a favorite of hummingbirds. And actually after Hurricane Wilma, which came through in October and just about ruined everyone's Halloween, I think, I was standing at the fence speaking with my neighbor, and we were lamenting, I wonder what happened to all the hummingbirds, because they had already arrived. And I hear, and suddenly I look down, and this plant was growing low to the ground, not a leaf ruffled, flowers were there, perfect, and the hummingbirds were on it. So the hummingbird nectar source was safe. Now we found that this one is kind of growing a little too well at the extension. It's growing and kind of climbing up on the bamboo there. So keep an eye on it. If it's not native, or if you don't get the right native in the right place, things could get a little too large. I don't know about the yellow shrimp plant. Now, this is not a cultivar. This grows in other parts of the world. So I don't know the nectar resources of this, but it's a beautiful plant. You might just try it out and follow the links here to see where it comes from and what sort of growing conditions it's going to need. Knowing where it came from, the type of environment, the climate, is going to provide the information that you need to get it into the right place in your yard. So here's some more Justiceas. And we have both of these at the extension office. This one just is full of butterflies and hummingbirds. It blooms profusely in the winter. We have this one. I nicked a cutting from Chris Rollins' yard before he moved and sold his house, and I planted it in my yard, and I carried a cutting over to the extension office. It grows pretty fast, so anything that grows pretty fast, you want to keep an eye on. If it's not already on the Florida Exotic Pest Plant Council's list, it might appear in the near future. Beware of these non-native plants that just explode and cover vast territories, and it does produce seeds. But every time while I was watching Chris's house before it got sold, because it's way south in the Redland, every time I would arrive, this was covered with hummingbirds. It needs full sun or at least broken sunlight for it to produce the flowers. So, which brings me up to, this is a great book, and it's you can find it in our IFAS bookstore. These two plants are in Roger Hammer's book, but my copy has the names reversed, so I need to send an email to Roger to have that corrected in the next editions. But this was at the book fair last year. I don't think it's going to happen this year. They're doing some virtual things, but this is just one of many great resource books, and this book is not just natives, but it is all of the friendly non-native plants are included in this book as well. And I'm going to share a list of books and resources and talk about where you can find them in a PDF that I'll send to you guys afterwards. There's some great books I think quite a few of you might want to have, or at least take a trip to the library. This is a butterfly that I have not seen. So I have yet to see my first malachite, and this is where I want to say a little beware of looking at the larval host for this plant. This Blechem brownii is found in many parks. It's in abandoned groves, and it is a larval host for this plant. Here's a look at it. You guys have seen this weed growing around. I know you have. It has kind of an interesting little flower, but it's tiny. Category 2, invasive. However, this afternoon, I took a look and watched this video by Keys Moth, that's David Fine, on the malachite, and he just has spectacular photos of this butterfly. He raises it. He talks about being 11 and seeing his first one, and I still haven't seen one. But this is a weed that grows in old mangrove, citrus orchids, orchards, avocado orchards, and this is where you might find this butterfly hanging out. However, I would not purposely cultivate this plant, but I don't know if it's gotten into a lot of natural areas and overcome and taken the place of native plants, but you do see it everywhere. And the fact that it's category 2 invasive means we should beware of planting this or allowing it to grow. So this is the native thick leaf wild petunia. And this is a plant that a lot of people think they have. Follow the link here. I get people saying, oh, I've got the Ruellia succulenta. I found it at Kindle Indian Hammocks. No, and I'm not qualified to properly identify this because Ruellia, there are many species that have been brought here, that have been grown, experimented with as landscape plants, and we have a lot of the non-natives that pop up everywhere, and some of them will take over the landscape. We have a non-native, this has the little purple flowers on it, that just will cover the grove at the extension office. Still have never seen a malachite in the grove there, so it's not working. But if we do find this, if Connect to Protect ever has this plant, because it's a pine rockland plant, I will be like, I'll make a huge donation for one of these because I would love to see a malachite just once. So a lot of wording here. This is another plant. This is probably a plant that only a true butterfly lover would ever want to have in their yard. And I got excited one time because we did a project at Deering Estate, and Rudy, I hope you're listening tonight, because I saw you signed up. Rudy thought that he had found this at one of the nurseries, but it wasn't. So this is what the purple thistle looks like, and look at that scientific name. It's for all those prickles, but pollinators will just tear into this plant, and it's the larval host for the exquisite tiny little meadowlark butterfly. And sorry, I just forgot the name. The painted lady, how can I forget? Because the first part of its scientific name is Vanessa, who is our ornamental horticulture agent. It's named after you, Vanessa. So, and the painted ladies, I love the underside of the wings. They're very exquisite and very detailed. And we have Edith's publications on these both, so you can see. The little meadowlark is a small butterfly. You have to get down on, just lay in the grass, and you'll see one of the plants further into the presentation that that's a nectar source for this. So let me power through because we want to have time for questions. Porterweed, growing in my yard beautifully one year, and it is a larval host for the tropical buckeye, and it is nectar for many, 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 many butterflies. But please plant this in full sun because it doesn't do well in our cooler winters here, especially if it's a wet winter, if it's anywhere in partial shade. There's just an ethereal view of that flower, downlaying, getting the ant's eye view of how beautiful those purple flowers are. Tiny, but gorgeous. And another very small native plant, exquisite shape to this, must send off some extremely powerful nectar, about maybe an eighth or 3/16 in diameter on these flowers. This can get weedy, but you can cut it back and it will regrow, and it will also, the leaves will resprout from the stems. Great nectar source. So salvias, this is debated whether the Salvia coccinea is actually native, but all salvias are just fantastic nectar sources. This is the purple one that I have in my yard next to my purple rain barrel, and the hummingbirds are all over this all the time, and I can either hear them or I will see the branches on this purple salvia shake when they're collecting nectar. But not this salvia. This is a hybridized cultivar that has been grown for the landscape industry, and it's an annual bedding plant, and it has just no nectar in it. And Galfinia, we have this in the demo garden at the extension office. This is full of bees all the time and other smaller pollinators, little wispy wasp or lacewings. All of our native bees and skippers love this. It doesn't seed, although I've been told that some of these will seed. If it does, if you have one that seeds, you want to keep an eye on that because, again, this is not native. We don't want it spreading into natural areas. This is a non-native that seems to be very well behaved, and this is the magenta fire spike that was growing at my house in Miami Springs. I took cuttings and brought it to the extension office. This is a hummingbird magnet. You can see those long tubular shapes, and they will just hover around and take nectar. This will bloom profusely in the winter time as well. So those hummingbirds love the plants that are going to flower in the winter when they arrive here. This one, a little space for it. This is our South Florida wildflower that blooms in the spring. We don't have the gorgeous, roadside wildflowers that you'll see in Jarrett Daniels' presentation, but we have shepherd's needle. So arbutus, if you can allow a space for this to grow and you can occasionally cut it back and keep it from throwing seed everywhere, deadhead it when it looks a little messy. It's a larval host for this little Dina yellow, and also it's just a nectar magnet. It's in the Composiaceae family, and if you ever pick a bunch of them to make a bouquet and smell them, they smell like fresh cut daisies. Beware, that's what can happen to your socks. It will pop up as a weed, and if you pull it up before it gets too big, you can control it. But if you keep just running over with the lawnmower, it's going to keep sprouting back. Sweet almond, non-native. We had a beautiful specimen growing at the extension office, but Hurricane Irma took it out. Everyone who walked out the back door to go into the shade house or to the fruit grove would immediately smell this plant and comment on it. Very fragrant, full of bees, and again, skippers. Blanket flower, Laura and Jeff just planted some of this in the front of our extension office. This is a great beach dune, like dune sunflower. It likes drier areas, but it grows throughout Florida, and if you can deadhead it a little, you can keep this growing and looking really nice. If it starts to die back a little, you might have to just pull it up and shake the seed out and it'll sprout back up. One of my favorites, tiny, tiny. You can see the size of the flower and the size of the fingers here. This is a little minute flower, but again, I don't know what the nectar source it's pumping out, but everything comes to this for nectar. And it will be a great substitute for maybe a lawn as a ground cover. However, it's not good for walking over it. It will break. These are just a few of the butterflies that will come to it for nectar. Little meadowlark. Ooh, monarchs. Oh yes, oh my. And I have just, I don't know, at any given moment, at least 50 white peacock butterflies flitting through my yard. And the common buckeye butterfly will come to this as well. So there's just, it's also the larval host for the common buckeye and the Phaon crescent and the white peacock. So it's a larval host for 3 different butterflies. So yeah, plant this little, I think it used to be referred to as matchhead, was one of its common names. It's just a powerful little butterfly, larval host plant, and nectar plant. There you go. There's the white peacock and the common buckeye, and that's what the caterpillar of the common buckeye looks like. And you can see here it's on porterweed. Powder puff mimosa. I'm trying very hard to get this really growing thick in my yard. It's a beautiful little native, and it pops up with these puffy pink like pom-pom-like flowers that last for about 2 days. And it's also a larval host for the little yellow. And this is just some of the looks of the seasonal variation that you can have with this butterfly. This is on a Derek Daniels publication. Wow, I'm getting tongue twisted. Pineland croton. This is a larval host for 2 of our endangered butterflies. It has biodiversity issues because there are non-native pineland croton. There's the Bahamian pineland croton that is out there in the nursery trade. We want to stick to our native from here. And it also has pollination issues. You will have either all male flowers on a plant, or all female flowers, and the pollinator is not around. So this is a larval host plant, but it also needs a pollinator to go between the male and the female plants so that it produces seed and it continues to grow. And it is the loss of this plant and pine rockland that has caused the decline of these 2 butterflies that are endangered. And there's research out that it needs to be exposed to fire, or at least exposed to smoke for the seeds to germinate. It's a beautiful landscape plant. It will attract many pollinators to your yard, but this is really for pine rockland restoration. And at first I was like, oh, let's get this all over. Let's get this plant in all the parks and in all our landscapes. Well, it's highly unlikely that the Bartram's hair streak will travel any great distance. As a matter of fact, it usually stays in a very, very small area. So it's not going to travel very far it's not going to be attracted unless you live right next to a pine rockland. And in which case you want to make sure that all the plants in your landscape are suitable for a pine rockland. And unfortunately, the Florida leafwing has only been sighted in an area of the Everglades National Park. So I haven't seen this butterfly. No one has seen this butterfly. And they are both endangered. Pentas. This is a happy, easy plant that you can find at the big box store. So this is Gulf fritillaries on pale lavender. And I just want to stop here for a second and show you this plant. You can see the spent flower heads and you can see the new flower heads. If you pinch these off or cut them, then this will continue to flower profusely in the wintertime. This plant doesn't like to be too wet. It prefers our dry winters. So I do the little pinch, but you might want to use scissors and look closely and make sure you aren't pinching off or cutting off any of the new flower heads. You can tell, you just have to get used to it. And there are a lot of plants that if you're not growing them for seed, some of these non-natives, then you want to pinch the spent flower heads so that you get more flowers. And it doesn't spend a lot of energy trying to produce seeds. We haven't seen this one seed, which is a good thing because it's not native. We don't want it spreading itself everywhere and taking over natural areas. So it comes in a lot of colors. I've got purple in my yard right now, of course, to go with my purple rain barrel. Passiflora superosa or suberosa, I've seen it spelled both ways. Larval host for 3 different butterflies, must have. And here we were looking at planting it on a fence at the women's park, but we found out that that fence could be dangerous. You could trip and fall on it. And then Hurricane Irma came and took out everything that had been started in this butterfly garden. The tree really didn't belong there. The space was much too shady. You do need some sunlight. There were plenty of trees in the park. We needed a sunny spot for the butterfly garden. Well, we got it after Hurricane Irma, and we did get to plant this with all of the young ladies that are enrolled in the gym program at the women's park. But Julia Longwing, which roosts together as a colony at night, Gulf fritillary, I'm sorry, that was zebra longwing, Gulf fritillary, and the Julia longwing, which is not pictured here. And our plan was to intermingle the native, which doesn't have a large showy flower, it's about as big as your thumbnail, with the Passiflora carula, which is fragrant and non-native. And we would have the best of both worlds. We would have beautiful flowers and we would have a butterfly, beautiful butterfly larval host. But we didn't get to plant, we didn't get to do any sort of fence there to hold this vine. Mujanti, not native, recommended by some butterfly enthusiast as a nectar source. I have it in my yard. It's not throwing its seed or growing up wildly and escaping cultivation. And you can actually make a tea out of this. Those little flowers, inch, very, very fragrant. And one of my favorites here, this is growing at Crandon, and you'll find this growing in any area where it's moist. You'll find it in lawns that are overwatered, right, Laura? So this is a larval host for the white peacock butterfly. And there's the area of it growing at Crandon. I can't tell you exactly where because never collect in a natural area or from a park. These native plants are protected. And sunflowers. Miami-Dade Water and Sewer provides free sunflower trees, seeds, with their name stamped on it and their logo. And this is about the only seed that you can buy in bulk where you can brand with your logo that is suitable to grow down here in South Florida. It's drought tolerant. I'm going to send everybody a PDF that talks about all of the great benefits of sunflowers. They grow them here for the cut flower industry. They grow here all year long. And it's just an incredible, each one of these little true flowers in here needs to be pollinated so that it produces all those seeds, and sunflower seeds are harvested and they're very, very healthy for you. So this is a pollinator magnet again, and there's a project that you can also be part of where you do a pollinator count once a year on your sunflowers. These are just some of our partners in the Impearled Butterfly Working Group, and some of the people that we have mentioned previously in this, and I'm going to have to speed up. I want you to be aware that the Pine Rockland Symposium is going to be virtual this year. That is through Connect to Protect. It was in their newsletter. And you'll get this. Here's the site you can go to. You'll get this PDF, and you guys can sign up for that. And it's October 19th through 23rd, and you'll do, I don't know if we'll be able to do live field trips, October 26th through 30th. you can join Connect to Protect by simply sending them an email and with your name, email address, and phone number. Miami Blue Butterfly, yes. This is our local chapter of North American Butterfly Association, and it has some very, very important information on this website. First of all, we have the list of all the larval host plants for every butterfly in South Florida. And I just featured the swallowtails, just a smattering of what's available on the website. The hyperlinks are not working right now. That is one of my side projects that I thought I would have plenty of time to do, but working from home during COVID-19 is very tasking and no energy left to do it afterwards. We now have the butterfly checklist thanks to a donation by FPL and by Bob Kelly. So this will give you an idea of all of the butterflies that we have down here. And butterfly publications on EDIS, which is Electronic Data Information System from UF-IFAS Extension, and featured creatures. Explore those two websites and learn more about the butterflies. Native Plant Society. We didn't get to have Native Plant Day this year. This is a very, very important organization, as well as our local chapter of the Butterfly Association. If you're watching from another county, be sure to look up your local Native Plant chapter and your local North American Butterfly Association chapter. These publications cover butterflies that grow throughout the state of Florida, so you're going to want to look at the information. Excuse me. The Dade chapter has just updated their website and it's phenomenal. So all the information you need to know about why planting natives and just beautiful, gorgeous photos. And it also has a great list of where do you buy native plants and where do you find information about native plants. And you can also download that as a PDF little pamphlet. And it'll be hyperlinked if that nursery has a website. Of course, Institute for Regional Conservation. I have to say that this is by far the best plant database that on the planet right now. So the way it's structured and the information that it gives is just phenomenal. And there's a couple of other areas that George Can didn't explain that are very, very useful for parks, recreation, and open spaces when we're specifying plants that are within a park that has natural areas. And I just shared that with Crandon Park, and we're going to be working on selecting the right butterfly plants for that habitat. So we also have on UF-IFAS Gardening Solutions, which is about 3 or 4 years old now. So this goes through different types of gardens. You have butterfly gardens, and you're going to find these publications on EDIS, but you can also find them linked under Gardening Solutions when you look at types of gardens, butterfly gardens. And butterfly gardening in Florida is a must-read. That's Jarrett Daniels is one of the co-authors on this, and Community Butterfly Scaping, both of those. Check them out. And Miami-Dade County Parks, Recreation, and Open Spaces. This is the signage that we were able to put in many of the parks through the Parks for Pollinators grant. And that Parks for Pollinators program, that small grant, funded a lot of signage it funded plants, and it spun off into much, much more. We were able to, NFL, when they came in last year into Miami, since the Super Bowl was held here in January, the NFL Green program came here and connected with parks, and we continued planting pollinator plants in the parks throughout the year leading up to the Super Bowl. So this mission continues in our volunteer programs, and it brought down a NACO award for a lot of departments. You see Teresa Olchak, our extension director, she tasked herself with putting together the paperwork for this grant, but this was a wide, it was Parks Department, Million Trees Miami, NFL Green, Adopt a Tree. We did our launch for getting the surveys filled out that we needed for Parks for Pollinators, and it also funded a couple of little iPads, which I use to take photos everywhere of pollinators still. It has about 5,000 pictures in it right now. So this little grant went a long way and started what I hope continues. Florida Museum. This arrived in my inbox yesterday. How timely. And this is going to be a course that Jarrett Daniels is going to do online. And it's $15, and it's for beginner and novice butterfly gardeners. So it's right here, the link. I'll be sure to share that with you. I might just sign up because every time I listen to Jarrett talk, I learn more and more. And the Florida Museum is one of my go-to resources. I get their weekly updates in my inbox. I make sure I read them at lunchtime. I eat them up like dessert, and it's a great resource for brochures. And we have the Miami Blue activity books available. We weren't able to give them away to summer campers this year. Hopefully we'll be able to share them with school kids, children soon. Thank you, everybody. This is a proliferation of purple pickerel weed on Payne's Prairie. Say that 5 times.